Good morning. This is Dr. Matthew Dunn, host of The Future of Email. My guest today, a gent who's closer to my age than most guests, Mischa Zvegintzov. Did I get it right?
Matthew, amazing. Well done.
All right. Mischa, tell me about Mischa, man. We are getting acquainted live on the air here, man.
Yeah. Yep. So pleasantly surprised when I jumped on and saw that we are relatively close in age.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many people in the marketing, podcasting space, online marketing
Yeah.
space are the younger
They're
generations.
puppies, man. They're just
They,
puppies.
they are puppies. And speaking of that too, it's funny when you get to see the puppies have some success, they think they have it figured
Yeah.
out and it's
Yeah.
nowhere to go but up. But
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
well, hang
Yeah.
in there for a little bit
Hang in there
because
for a little bit.
it will rain, right?
So you went from stay-at-home dad to yoga to really building marketing and a brand. And tell me about the business.
Yeah, so I help people guest speak on podcasts. Well, really what I like to say is I help people go on an influence tour, and that
Mhm.
all starts with guest speaking on podcasts.
Mhm.
So we start to guest speak on podcasts, getting our message out there in a big way. So many benefits of that, which I'll say quickly, but there's obviously the call to action where I literally can say, hey, everybody, if you like what I'm talking about, you can join my influence army. That's what my membership is called, that I
Yeah.
help people guest speak on podcasts. It's
Mhm.
called the Influence Army. Go to badzuck.com. Again, badzuck.com. Join my influence army and we'll start getting you on podcasts. So there's that power right there. Anyone listening right now,
Yeah.
right? Um, and then podcasting. So sometimes the host will direct recommend us to someone. So
Mhm.
by the time we're done with this conversation, you are probably going to know a couple of people who are at least our age and perhaps some youngsters, but you're like, hey, I think you need to talk to Mischa because this guy is smart, savvy, has been through it. He can help you. And so you might make a direct recommend.
Sure. Sure.
Yep. Sometimes the hosts themselves will use the services. By the time we're all said and done here, Matthew, you might go, wow, I need to be guest speaking on more podcasts. So help me,
Mm.
right?
Connect a lot
Uh,
of people. What got you interested in this?
boy, that's such a great question. So I I'm old school sales. I was feet on the street sales for 20 years, some combination of door to door as in business to business. So in
Mhm.
the early 2000s, late 1999, 2000 and such, I was in the tech space, going door to door, business to business, selling IT infrastructure.
Okay.
Then next thing you know, I have, oh boy, built telemarketing teams. I've literally made 1 million hand dialed phone calls myself, then started using auto dialers,
Wow.
things like that. Yeah. Then I started sending out massive flyer campaigns to get the phone to ring and building scripts and doing all those sorts of things. The bulk of my sales experience was in the home mortgage industry. So from about 2001 to about 2015, somewhere in there, funded $1.5 billion in home loans. And that's a lot of houses, a lot
That's
of
a lot of houses.
refinances.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, mentors back at those times were Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar. I would have those tapes
Yeah.
literally on my
Yeah.
Walkman and autoplay. But fast forward to 2012 time frame, 10, somewhere in there, divorce, both parents died in rapid succession. What else happened? Financial distress, career upheaval, more failed relationships. And all of a sudden, I found myself as a single dad needing to get my boys through school. And just the universe was like, you need to retire, get your
Mm.
boys through school.
Mm.
Yeah. By the grace of God, I had you know, enough money in the bank to retire. I'll never forget the day I went to my boss and said, hey, man, I quit. I'm done. I'm retiring. And he goes, we'll match whatever offer you have out there. And I said, no, you don't understand. Like, I'm done. I'm retiring. I quit.
There are offers that can't be matched.
Exactly. And this was 2014, 15. I've lost track of the exact timeline. But he looked me straight in the eyes and said, man, I wish I could quit too. I'll never forget it. But anyway, I retired, and my focus was hold space for those two boys, get them through grade school, get them through high school.
Mhm,
I love yoga, meditation, all the mindfulness practices. And so basically I became a substitute yoga teacher.
mhm.
So I'm in Encinitas, California, perhaps the mecca of West Coast yoga. And there's plenty of classes to be a sub teacher. So it really just allowed me to hold space for those boys, make their lunches, get them to swim lessons. I loved reading in my boys' classes. I don't know if you ever had an opportunity to do that, but loved that. But anyway, as one son got out of high school and moved out, and the other one was getting ready to, intuitively, I knew that I would have an opportunity to express myself entrepreneurially, be an entrepreneur again, marketing, sales. I love all that stuff, marketing, sales, entrepreneuring. And so I got in Russell Brunson's funnel. You know who
Mm,
Russell Brunson
yeah,
is?
sure. Click
Yeah.
funnels, right?
Yeah, ClickFunnels, right. So he's a master online marketer, and I
Yeah.
ended up in his ecosystem.
Hmm.
And of course, being A-type compulsive, I jumped right into his $25,000 a year coaching program. This was a few years ago by now. And I'll never forget it. I was talking to Waylon, who was 17, 18 at the time, just about to graduate from high school. And I said, hey, Waylon, uh, I found this guy, Russell Brunson. You know, I can't wait to jump back into online marketing, bring all this old school feet on the street experience into the the new world of this digital marketing. And I said, hey, it's going to cost $25,000 a year. I can't believe I told him that. But also it's going to take a lot of time away that I had from you. And he said, hey, Dad, I got my girlfriend. I've got my job. I'm just about to graduate, got college dialed in. Like, do it. You don't need to babysit me anymore. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So just dove straight in. And fast forward to I'm going to all these masterminds, in Mexico and Arizona and Florida, just meeting thousands of entrepreneurs, literally. I start a podcast, which is called the Table Rush Talk Show. Right away, Russell Brunson was like, start a podcast. So I start it. So I'm interviewing people, interviewing people. I do an online virtual summit. I'm interviewing people. I'm traveling around the world talking to entrepreneurs. And it becomes very clear very quick that us entrepreneurs are horrible at telling our own stories,
Nice.
right? And then we're also horrible at telling our stories through our customers' eyes. One of the things that Russell Brunson is so gifted at and taught me and I saw is getting those customer testimonials dialed in,
Hmm.
getting them on camera, getting them written, and then being able to tell your company's story through your customer's eyes,
Mm, nice.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm seeing all this happening, and I'm interviewing all these people. I love people's stories too. I was a home loan officer, so I talked to thousands of people. And one of the questions you have to ask is, what do you do? What's your 2-year work history? And my niche in the home loan business was CEOs, CIOs, CTOs, GMs, VPs. I had just gravitated. I have a finance degree, all this stuff, can speak interest rates, blah, 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 blah. So would just be fascinated by what these entrepreneurs were doing, what these VPs were doing. So it was really easy and natural for me to have those conversations. Anyway, uh, I'm going along. So all of a sudden, people start paying me to get their customer video testimonials.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm flying around. Yeah, right. So people are like, okay, you're good at interviewing people. You're
Yeah.
personable. I ask great questions. You basically want to get the customer story arc. That's what I
Mhm.
call it, the framework. Get the customer story arc. And so I got flown to Ireland to get customer testimonials there, all around the United States. Anyway, I'm getting all these customer testimonials. Being relatively new to the online marketing space, even though I'm getting paid, I have horrible imposter syndrome, right? Where I'm like, am I adding value? Do I know what I'm doing? Is this going anywhere? Should I be putting myself out there?
Yeah.
Two things happened really quick in quick succession. One of my customers, her name is Stacy Oliver. I wake up one morning to an email from her that says, Mischa, you're the only one that moves the needle in my business. She said, I pay all these other people and nothing happens. She says, I pay you and you drive revenue for me.
Nice.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I am adding value. My old school knowledge is
Mhm.
serving in this new realm. And at the same time, coincidentally, I'd had a buddy, his name is Ryan Lipsey, and he's a title officer. So in real estate, if you buy a house or do a refinance, you need a title to show that who owns the house, blah, 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 blah. But he's been doing it forever. He's got this massive realtor following. And he had been harassing me saying, Mischa, I need you to teach my realtors how to get video testimonials from their customers.
Nice. Yeah.
Yep. And then I'm pretty savvy with repurposing that content. And he's like, you got to show them how to turn that into micro content, into reels, TikToks, all these things. So he'd been harassing me, finally broke me down after a few months. And I said, okay. So I get on his show. It's called the Small Business Spotlight. And I talk about my perfect video testimonial system, my 5-step system for getting your customers to gladly do your selling for you. Hey, thank you, Apple.
Look at
We
that.
got fireworks.
We got fireworks.
I need to turn that off. So I crush it. I absolutely crush it. And I was like, I'm adding value. I've got a story to tell. I can tell the story. I need to go on a podcast tour. So I do this crazy Facebook post where I go, I'm going to go on this podcast tour. I'm going to teach everybody how to get their customer video testimonials, but I'm going to bring all my old school sales and marketing knowledge into it. So I'm going to create the scripts. How do you find the podcast emails? How do you find the shows? What do you say? Just all the stuff,
Mhm.
right? And I go, who would want those assets? And I got this flood of engagement. And I was like, oh my gosh, like people have a story to tell and they need help telling it. And I was like, that's it. Light bulb went off. I can help people guest speak on podcasts, use all my stuff. But that's to give you a relatively long answer.
Mm.
But I hope that answers it.
No, that's actually quite fascinating on a whole bunch of levels. Two quick backup questions. Where in Wyoming and how the heck did you get from finance to this kind of marketing acumen?
Yeah, boy, that's another great question. So Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Okay,
So,
nice
yep,
place. Yeah,
yep,
yeah,
yeah, Teton Village, the
yep,
big ski area if
yeah,
you're a
yeah,
skier. So yeah, I grew up skiing, fishing, camping,
yep,
snowboarding.
yeah. Early
Um,
days of snowboarding.
yeah, early days of snowboarding. As a matter of fact, yeah. So I started snowboarding in 1985, 1986.
Yeah, early.
Yeah. And before that, I'd been riding Snurfers. I don't know
Yep,
if you
yep. I
remember.
remember the
Yep.
Snurfer. You, the leash on the front, baby snowboard, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would climb Teton Pass, which is in Wilson, Wyoming, just
Yep.
outside of Jackson, and we'd snurf down it. Anyway, I'm in senior of high school, and I see somebody on a Burton snowboard, like one of the first ones around the
Yep.
time, and I was
Yep.
like, that is insane. I need
Yeah, yeah.
that. So anyway, I start snowboarding, but I was literally the first snowboarder
I'll bet.
on many
I'll
of the
bet.
ski
Yeah,
areas in
I'll
the
bet.
West Coast,
I'll bet.
California, Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, Targhee. Like I would be and we were all of us back
Before you
in
got
that time.
banned, right?
before we got banned. Absolutely. We were on the race to see who could
Yeah,
notch, the
yeah,
first border on the lift.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, what happened was is I I started in financial services, my sales. So I I I had moved to San Francisco Bay Area, and I was what, 4, 5, 6, 7 years out of college. I had been a snowboard instructor. I was a pro snowboarder, so I was in the magazines, things like that. But I kept getting injured. And so I was like, I gotta get my life together. Right. Anyway, had a finance degree. I end up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I start I become a retail commodities broker, which is the gnarliest of the boiler room telemarketing at
Yeah,
the time.
yeah.
So literally boiler room telemarketing, if that makes sense when I say that to you.
Yep,
Yep.
yep,
Yep.
yep. You
Dot,
you can
dot.
hear in the background all the other guys making the calls when that guy calls you, right?
Yes.
And you were probably literally dialing pre-auto dialer, as you said.
Yep. So I'm dialing
Hard
like
job.
mad. What's that?
Hard job.
Hard job. Oh, it was brutal. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. I mean, it was
No,
literally brutal. It
no.
was it was brutal. And the
Yeah,
people that I was working with were of sketchy character, said with love.
yeah, yeah,
you know? and and so I'm in it, but I'm just paying my dues, dialing,
yeah.
learning how to talk on the phone, listening to Zig Ziglar, doing all these things, and really learning my chops. So I get 2 or 3 years into it. Tech boom's in full swing in the San Francisco Bay Area. Somebody says to me, "Hey, Misha, you are an animal on the phones. Tech is in full swing. Like, we need a guy like you selling for us." And so all of a sudden, I go from just grinding it out so gnarly to, here's stock options, here's a base salary, here's a crazy commission structure. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So literally overnight on paper, I'm worth a whole bunch of money due to these stock options. And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. It's probably what people went through with Bitcoin. But anyway, next thing, overnight, 4 or 5 months later, NASDAQ crashes. I don't know if you remember that time.
Sure.
All my stock options worth nothing.
Yeah.
And so you have a 6 month vesting period.
Yep.
So like month 4, I'm like, I can't wait to buy a house or whatever.
Sorry,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Sorry. Overnight.
it was
Literally
brutal.
worth, yeah,
You're talking
brutal.
.com crash, right?
Yep. Dot
Yeah,
com crash. Yep.
yeah, yeah,
And so at the time, it was such a crazy time.
yeah. It was.
Company goes bankrupt. I get a raise to go to another tech company.
Yeah.
It goes bankrupt. I get another raise to go to Pac Bell at the time. It was,
Woo.
yeah, SBC,
Yeah,
Pac
yeah.
Bell.
Shoot, what's his name? Cartoonist, no longer very popular. Worked at Pac Bell, right? Scott
Yeah.
Gilbert. Gilbert guy.
Yes. Yes. So grinding it out in the corporate structure, and the market is so brutal back then.
Yeah.
It literally, I went from grinding on the phones, having success, to that market completely collapsed. I went to SBC Pac Bell, and for 1 year I did not sell one thing.
Oof.
And I'm a hard worker, right? Especially at the time. So I'm dialing, going on appointments, cold calling, doing everything I can. Not only did I not sell anything, I sold inverse. I got handed this territory, and SBC's VPN product at the time was so bad.
Was so bad. Yeah, because telcos were trying to figure out what their place was in a packet
Yeah,
world. Yeah.
right. And the other thing was, at the time, due to the crazy government regulations, the telcos had the tech,
Yeah.
but due to regulation, they couldn't sell it. So we were having to resell third-party services
Yeah.
by law,
And they
right?
didn't
So
know.
we
Yeah.
couldn't sell the
Yeah.
good stuff.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, yeah. So we were selling, it was called COVID. I think, no, it was it COVID? It might even literally, the company might have been called COVID. You could look it up. But oh my gosh, that's funny. I never
Yeah.
made that connection.
Wow.
So we're selling this third-party VPN that's so bad
Yeah.
that I get handed this territory. People are backing out of their their contracts. So not only did I sell nothing, I sold negative. It was brutal. Anyway, I had
You're
my
making me nostalgic, man.
yeah, right. This is kind of fun. No, it's just so fun telling these stories.
Yeah.
I forget them. So here's what happens. I am trying to get a job anywhere doing anything. And I have my wife, Dawn, at the time, who's, as I said, divorced now, but we're great friends. We've been divorced 10, 12, 15 years, something like that. But at the time, I'm married to Dawn. We have Cooper is 9 months old. And I am trying to get a job anywhere doing anything. And so SBC, Pac Bell, I was like, I'll move to Wisconsin. I'll climb telephone poles. I'll hang
Yeah.
telephone
Yeah.
wire. Like I got a mouth to feed,
Yeah.
right? Tech has completely collapsed. The economy is kind of shaky at best. So
Yep.
there's no jobs.
Yep.
What my Don's wife's husband, Darren Riley was his name, had been in mortgages, third generation mortgage broker, best of the best mortgage broker you will ever meet. So Darren and his wife had been saying, Mischa, they've been telling me for years, you need to get into the mortgage business. You know, finance, you know, you're good with people. You've paid your dues. You know how to dial the phones. All this stuff. You need to get in the mortgage business. And for whatever reason, I was like, absolutely not. I don't want to work with family. I'm not moving to San Diego. I get laid off finally, SBC. I'm trying to find another job. My only option is a job with Darren, Oceanside, California, pack up and leave San Francisco. And I did not want to leave San Francisco. I love San Francisco. And I thought you're sentencing me to suburban hell in San Diego. Right. And so I end up in San Diego and 2001, and everything comes together for me in the mortgage business. Everything. There's what's called the multiple listing service,
Sure.
the MLS,
Hmm.
which is much more prevalent and known now, but back then,
Yeah.
realtors really only knew about it.
Yeah.
Darren goes, here's a thing called the MLS where all properties are listed for sale. And here's the password. And I was like, I'm a data guy.
Yeah.
And I was like, you mean I can log in and download every property listed for sale? And he goes, you sure can. And as the new listings come up, I can know that. He goes, yep. And so I started marketing to him.
Sure.
I was like, hey, you're selling your current house, you need a new one. So you're probably going to need a home loan. So
Yeah.
that was, I'm just dialing for dollars there, start mailing to him. Then a title guy comes to me and says, hey, here's access to a database of every property in California that you can subscribe to. And it's data rich. I'm like, what? I can have access to that? And he goes, you sure can. And so I'm just downloading properties, all the robust information, doing what's called reverse of hands, getting the phone numbers. So I'm
Hmm.
telemarketing, whatever. It just went crazy. And at the time, then, uh, mortgages, real estate
Yeah.
before the
Pre
meltdown.
08, right?
Yeah. So I worked for Wells Fargo Home Mortgage,
Hmm.
which was a paper. There's what's called prime loans, which are the best of the best loans, A paper loans. Wells Fargo is the best of the best, still is today, although they do some sketchy stuff on the banking side. But anyway, um, so I was doing A paper. I was part of the solution, not part of the problem, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But anyway, so even through the meltdown, I thrived. It was just, I'd find the niche, find it's just my gift. Fast forward to divorce, financial chaos due to, this was like 2014-ish, 13. Parents had died, gotten divorced, more failed relationships. I had money in the bank and I was like burned out.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't do this anymore. Retired, got my kids through school. And part of my journey is how can I be of service? Like I've just had this prayer and mantra. this may be way too much information for you, but when I was 17 years old, I got sober. I got clean and sober. I was a derelict, right? And judge rank, I graduated judge rank. Judge rank last day of high school tells me you can go to jail for 6 months or you can go to treatment. And for whatever reason, the path of addiction unfolded in front of me, and I was like, "Ah, no." So I chose recovery. I've been on straight line recovery ever since. So I'm super active in the recovery community, mentoring people, helping people, change their lives in that regard. But part of that lens is ego reduction. And part of that ego reduction is how can you be of service? So my whole life is, I've always had this prayer and mantra, how can I be of service? What can I bring to the table? And I say that before I jump on this with you. And so as I'm getting ready to re-enter the entrepreneurial space, Waylon's about to graduate. It's like, hey, God, how can I be of service? What can I bring to the table here? And fast forward, it's like help people get their message out
People get their
on
message
pod.
out.
Yeah.
Waylon for Jennings
Yeah, Waylon for Jennings, exactly.
and
Yep.
Cooper.
Cooper, hockey. Well, I obviously have a Russian name, Russian background, so I don't know if you remember Cooper hockey products, but
I don't, but yeah,
Russians like hockey, so I was like
just a bit,
Cooper.
just a bit. I'm curious about your perspective. The chronology is kind of interesting because you sort of took you what is not retired, quit and then unquit
Yeah.
on either side of arguably the real explosion of social media, especially digital, everything's on the net in general. What looked different as you started sort of walking back into, you talked about old school. What looks different about the new school and what's not actually as different as everybody thinks?
I love that. So what looked different, excuse me, I'd always had this dream of speaking on stage, selling one to many. Webinars were kind of percolating as I was in the tail end of my mortgage
Yeah.
career. And so all that was put on halt all of a sudden,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, Russell's one of the masters of one-to-many sales,
Yeah.
webinars, those sorts of things. So it was a natural gravitation to him. Um, so love that about online marketing. That was the big thing is like you can do one-to-many sales. This type of conversation right here
Mm-hmm.
could be resonating with 30 people
Sure.
right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how powerful is
And
that?
it could be resonating with another 30 people in a year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really the intriguing thing to me. Storytelling, old school sales is about telling the story. I don't care if you're door to door selling pots and pans, selling solar, selling siding, whether you're going business to business, selling T1 lines, you know, tech
I know what that
infrastructure.
is.
Yeah,
We may
I
have
know.
to
I knew you
we may
would.
have to explain it for the audience.
I know. T1 line is like the old
Yeah.
school data line
Yeah.
audience, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Just before you could get internet.
yeah, before you could just call AT&T and
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd like your I'd like your 1 gigabyte,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
whatever.
Whew.
Yeah, so selling T1 lines, DS3 lines, and for
Yep.
anybody
Yep.
listening, DS3 lines were the dream, right? Those
45
are like
megs,
the
if I
big,
recall right.
yeah, the big pipes, right?
Big
The
pipes.
big data pipes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Um, anyhow, what was I saying before I
So
got
just
distracted?
what's
Oh,
what's different as you come out the other side of that time away, and the world arguably changed a lot in that period.
yeah. Yeah. So, you know, just the force of social media, the
Mm.
force of yeah, social media is crazy. The power of email lists. I was heading that direction of in mortgages of all right, it's I can reach out to my existing mortgage customers via email in an
Mm,
effective manner
mhm,
for quarterly reviews, for
mhm.
all these sorts of things, right? Do you have a son that needs a loan? Are you getting married,
Right,
getting divorced, whatever?
right,
All these
right.
ways to communicate on a bigger level,
Yeah.
right? With mail merge and things like that, and so all of a sudden that was put on halt. So to see that exponentially in 2015, 16, when did I really start in earnest into this? 2019, I guess. I was just teaching yoga for a while, getting my kids through school, posting on Facebook a little bit, right? But all of a sudden I'm back in it.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, email is king, right? We got to be collecting email addresses. That's very important if you want to resell. I think that's missed a lot. A lot of people think that I can just talk on Facebook or TikTok or whatever. But
Yeah.
ultimately, if we're not building that asset of that email list, we're doing ourselves a disservice because TikTok could get shut down by the US government any day.
Or they could
Facebook,
change their rates or policies or whatever. You don't own your TikTok audience. They do.
absolutely. Yep. Facebook, the very interesting thing when I jumped back into the entrepreneurial space in earnest 3, 4 years ago, whatever it was, as we record this, the iOS change was happening or just about to change. So,
Oh, app privacy protection, you mean?
yep. And so, multi-million dollar businesses
Yep.
that were built on Facebook ads and that rich iOS data
Mm-hmm.
or the Apple data from the phone
Yeah.
overnight collapsed.
Yep. Yep.
And so that was the other thing about guest speaking on podcasts. I was like, we need to learn how to build organic content. We need to learn how to talk one to many and not be dependent on Facebook ads. The other thing too that is so horrifying, which I saw it again and again and again and again, man. And we still see it today is people trying to learn their message by buying Facebook ads. And you will go broke before you dial in your messaging, before you dial in your product, before you do all this stuff. As far as bootstrapped entrepreneurs,
Yep.
solopreneurs, what
Yep.
have you,
Yep.
small business owners, right? So it's like the model is literally from what I've seen and what I believe. And what's the guy's name who speaks to it so well? I can't remember. He's got such a great podcast. It's called oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm gapping on it. Colin, Colin Boyd. What's his podcast? Everybody should listen to it. But he talks about, because he went through this himself and he speaks to it so eloquently, is learn what your audience wants and needs by having conversations with them. Obviously, how do you do that? You get on podcasts, you get on, you know, summits, you guest blog, you do all these things. You're getting that feedback and you're learning, the pain points of your customer. What's their current pain state? What's their future happy state? And how do we become that bridge,
Mm-hmm.
as Stu McLaren likes to say? Um, but a lot of people, so you do all that once your messaging is dialed in, once you're able to build your business organically, then you go, all right, now I know my messaging. Now I know all this stuff. Now I have all this recon, all this data, or call it what you will, my messaging down. Now apply that to ads. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 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 As versus thinking, yeah, thinking someone's going to sell you that insight.
Yeah,
Hence bad
absolutely.
Zuck.
Hence bad Zuck. You got it.
Nice. Nice.
Yes. Yes, yes. So
I like
one
that.
of the key things that I think people miss that is absolutely enforced today, bar none, is follow up, follow up, follow up.
Yeah.
Most people
Yeah.
think I'm going to be shiny on Facebook or the social media.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a lead and it's going to sell itself. Reality is you got to follow up, follow up,
Yeah.
follow up. If
Yeah.
someone DMs you and says I'm interested and you say, "Great, here's the link to buy," you're probably going to have to follow up 3 or 4 or 5 times.
Right.
Fortunes in the follow up. rule that we had that I still use today back in the day, and I don't know if it was Zig or Brian Tracy or who it was, but it was 5 times. Like count on needing to follow up 5 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what now? Oh, we can automate all that, right? So
We can if
a
yeah.
lot of it.
Yeah, but yeah, I go back and forth on that. I mean, I do the automation stuff as a software developer. I loathe it as a recipient. Like,
Yeah.
when you get a message that's clearly just a crappy mail merge, right? Hey, Dr.
Yes.
Matthew, go the heck away. Like, seriously, you didn't even bother to look at my name, so I know it's a mail merge.
Yes. And well,
Yeah,
I think when I say automate it,
yeah.
so
You mean really automate it?
well, and also building out the templates and the responses. So
Hmm.
one thing that I learned, and this holds true today, which I think people don't think holds true, but it absolutely holds true. Back in the day, I would find a new niche,
Hmm.
I would start marketing to it, and then I would start getting responses. The no's,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
what I can't remember what we call it, but the no's. And so we need to learn how to meet those objections. So I would start writing down, literally, I'd start a new campaign, find a new niche, write the scripts that I thought would work, and start testing them in the market.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And then people start saying no, no, no. And so you write down the no. I literally would write down the no. And
Hmm.
so how am I going to meet that? And either I need to tweak my product so I can address
Yeah,
it, or I
yeah,
need to learn how to address that as not being a real thing
yeah,
or what have, right?
yeah.
And so then you've got a templated response. And so when I say automate it, I want to write that response one time and then be able to just cut and paste and tweak it a little bit. So
Yeah.
I'll still hand respond, if you want to call it that, or
Sure,
by
sure.
email or something like that. But it's like, what's the objection and what answer do they need? Now, that can be automated on like,
Yeah. Once you
right?
once you learn your market and once you've got product market fit, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then it's even a matter of the higher ticket you sell. So you have your company, campaignGenius.io. You're into email, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you probably have a high ticket solution, I'm
Yeah.
guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the higher ticket, perhaps the higher touch. So that needs a
Yeah.
personal DM.
Yeah.
It needs a personal phone call. It
Yeah.
needs a personal email.
Yeah.
But realistically, we don't need to rewrite the whole thing.
Yeah.
We need to
Sure.
just personalize the
Yeah.
the template, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Take that set of insights and back into our conversation about social media a little bit. Seems to me we're at a tension point about what amount of privacy and what amount of convenience, what we're willing to give away and what it costs us in attention when we give that away. And we're very different in the US than most other markets. We'll give more away for convenience. But even now, we're starting to say, hang on, enough. The successor to the app privacy protection that you mentioned is starting to happen now. The eventual death of the third party cookie, which fundamentally is privacy driven. Like, where does this go? Are we going to continue to be an open book for every sales guy? Are we going to start to close that book a bit? How do you think it's going to pan out?
Yeah, that's another great, great question. I think that definitely the pendulum of privacy is swinging more restrictive, if we
Mhm.
want to say it that way, which
Yeah,
I
I
don't think
agree.
is
Yeah,
bad,
yeah,
right? Um, so I think the more we can craft and hone in our message organically, talking to you right now, I'll debrief after this and I'll go, oh, what a great freaking conversation with Dr. Matthew, right? Like, wow. And so as I can hone, refine, craft that, whoever's best at that,
hmm
doesn't really matter how much they restrict the privacy. I'll be able
hmm
to speak to an audience effectively for ads
yeah,
and things like that, if
yeah,
that makes sense. And
yeah,
so many people are sloppy with it, right? In the heyday of Facebook ads
yeah,
or YouTube ads or things like that,
Yeah.
right? First adapters could just throw spaghetti at the wall and make money. And then as those restrictions come in around us,
Yeah.
those who dial it in the best can still have that positive return on investment or ROI,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
I
the,
think,
the example you gave personally of early use of the MLS data,
yeah,
right? I don't think that would fly as well now.
no way, man. You would get, yeah,
Yeah.
I could get away with a lot back then.
Right.
And people
Right.
were like, that was amazing that you're so smart. And now people would be like,
Yeah.
you're verging on breaking the law, my
You're
friend.
verging on breaking the law. Well, and also that adoption curve, which you alluded to, it's Ev Rogers' diffusion of innovation curve, right? Their early adopters will go, oh, wait a minute, we could do this with it. And there's going to be enough bad actors in the early adopter or middle adopter stage that take it too far,
Take it
that
too far.
eventually we go, hang on a second, let's put some additional rules and breaks and things like that because I really don't want to call about a mortgage. I just don't. I get occasional text messages, which irks me to death. I get text messages, hey, do you want to sell? I'm like, A, don't text me. I didn't say you could. And B, I'm like, piss off. No, I don't. I
Yeah,
don't even want to have to answer you.
right. You know what's so interesting? So you see it on LinkedIn
Yeah.
or things like that where people automate the reach out process and
Yes.
then LinkedIn shuts you down at
Yep.
100 emails or
Yep.
50. So people
Yep.
get banned or things like that. Or you see that on Instagram or what have you. And
Yeah.
what's interesting is there's a whole bunch of data available to people. You can scrape
Sure.
websites. You can
Yeah.
scrape, right? And so there's all these scraping bots, and people are using AI to
Yeah.
automate the scraping and all this.
Yeah.
Working with a company that's built on that, like those are questions that I ask. So there's companies out there they'll help you crush LinkedIn. And so I'm like, well, is your fundamental business based on breaking the rule? That door window is going to close,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? I know to answer those questions because
Yeah.
I'm 55 years old and been through it enough and worked the system
Yeah. Yeah.
effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Anyway, I don't want to overplay that, but I think that if you find something that works by scraping, for example,
Mm.
can you find the person that's getting that data? I don't know if I want to say legally, but uh, has paid Apple for API access. So they're right. So then you're rebuying from Apple, right? Like it's somebody who's legally, ethically, commercially accessing the data, the API through APIs. I don't mean to go too deep techno babble, but there's companies out there that are
Sure.
right that are have API access by paying for API access to
Hmm.
different
Hmm.
databases. And it's all databases. We can call it whatever we want. In reality, it's all a database housing certain data. And so can I access that data and I pay somebody to access that data? I think I'm going down a rabbit hole. Should I stop or?
Well, I mean, the fascinating thing is be at you can be at this a long time, and it's going to change around you, and we'll be grappling with some new stuff, and then still have some of the same principal challenges to wrestle with, right?
Yeah,
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 companies and people who are of service tend to cut through the noise eventually because fundamentally what they're trying to do is going to end up being beneficial to their customer. The ones that are just on the quick, on the cheap, looking to make the sale and then move on, and it's not really of service. Hopefully, I'd like to hope that they
yeah,
go out of business.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. You just made me think of something else that is an old truth that is a truth now. And so back in the day, so when I started in the late 90s, telemarketing, selling door to door, things like that, you had to take the risk and put yourself out there.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
had to make that first phone call.
Yeah.
You had to knock on that first door. You had to write that first script and then go test it and try it.
Yeah.
And I think the illusion is that with social media, none of that holds true, but it all holds true. You still, so many of us still need to make that first video, make that first post, make that first offer, get the data, right? You still have to take the risk and put yourself out there and hopefully learn from it. Yeah.
I I wonder, I mean, we talked about this before I hit record, that we're, both in the Two Boys Club, as dads, and kids are roughly the same age.
Yeah.
Um, the reduction in willingness to converse face to face is a bit of an unexpected shift, and I'm going to pick on, I'm going to pick on younger millennials and so on. Like, what do you mean you called me without texting me first? Like that sort of ethos. And I'm thinking it's actually a surprising advantage to be open to and understand the value of putting yourself out there and having the conversation, because you always learn stuff that you weren't expecting to learn by that actual direct engagement, not mediated, not messaged, not, in a sense, not scripted, right? That's where
Yeah.
you start going, oh, that's what they really need, or that's what the real problem is, not what I thought
Yeah.
it was, right?
Yeah.
And you can't buy Facebook ads. This kind of goes back to your Facebook. You can't buy Facebook ads to let you know what you don't know, but you can get that out of a conversation.
Absolutely. And yeah. Yes.
Hmm.
I did a podcast episode. I wish I remember the number of it, but I had that epiphany just that you talked about,
Mm-hmm.
where I was like, I'm just going to pick up the phone and call this person and close the deal.
Yeah, yeah,
And I started doing that, right? This was within the last 2 years, where I was like,
really.
all that person needs is a little high touch.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
pick them up and call them,
yeah,
right? And I was like, oh my gosh. And so many people won't do that, or they're trying to outsource it too. So everything's trying to be outsourced, appointment setters, this, that, the other thing,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like where it's like, I'll do what we used to say back in the day, or you'd hear people would say, if I could just, I'm great at closing the deal. It's like, no, you're not, because you're not good at getting the pipeline full. Like
Yeah.
people who, I don't know, this could be a really funny rant, but people want to pay to get their appointment set, and then people want to pay to have the deal closed. People don't want to work.
Yeah.
I don't know. I want to
Yeah.
automate all that.
I wonder about that. I mean, with it'd be cliche for a couple of guys of our generation to say, "Well, these kids don't want to work." I don't think that's actually true. I think what work they think is necessary may be different than how they're being shaped to work.
I love that. That's such a great way to say it. Yeah, my boys are more than willing to work and have
Mine
paid
too.
their dues and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and love it and have great work
yeah, yeah,
ethics.
yeah, yeah,
However,
yeah,
I think the general perception with social media and all that is like, oh, you have to be an influencer. Oh, you just be an influencer and tell your story, and you'll magically money will appear, right?
yeah, yeah. Or what's the one what drives me nuts, right? I'm going to be a thought leader. Like, well, maybe you should start with thinking and seeing if you have something worth saying before you, and then we'll decide if you're leading or not. Honestly, let the audience
Oh
tell you
my
that, or
God.
market tell you that.
Yeah. So good. So
Um,
good.
hey, one other question before we wrap. And it's really relevant to what you're doing with podcasts. Like, you look at the panoply of equipment in your office, in my office, we get high def cameras, mics on booms, machines recording stuff, AI transcribing as we're going. None of this stuff existed like 6, 8 years ago. You wouldn't do this. Boom. And like everybody is NBC, CBS, ABC themselves sitting in their office now. Isn't that just wild.
It is wild. The barrier to entry to having your own TV
Yeah.
show, your
What
CBS.
barrier,
Have you seen?
right?
There is none,
There
right?
is none. Like we've
There
got a
is none.
TV show in here, right?
Oh, it's so
Boom.
crazy. Boom.
Is it gonna is it gonna last? Like podcast specifically, let's pick on that since that's your area of expertise. It it seems like we're in a boom for podcast, which is a kind of a cool surprise to me, actually. Um, but you also see the beginnings of pullback, Spotify kind of backing off on level of investment and stuff like that. Where do you think this goes?
I think, again, with the barrier to entry being so low,
Yeah,
that I don't know if we've reached peak podcast creation. How about
right.
that?
Yeah,
Right. Um, so I don't know. There's 4 or 5 million podcasts
wow,
and counting, right? And
wow.
I'm sure it'll be 6 million or 7 million next year. The
Yeah,
the dirty little secret is that the bulk of the podcasts, like 50% or more,
yeah,
don't make it past 3 episodes.
yeah, yeah. I'm not
80% don't make
surprised.
it past 10 episodes.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's called pod fade. There's a term for it, pod fade.
Your episode number 102, by the way, for the future of email.
Amazing. That's so good. That shows a passion for it, for one, well, a labor of love too, right? That willingness to keep at it. I love statistics, and when I got my finance degree, I took a lot of statistics classes, and I had this amazing teacher named Dean. I wish I could remember his last name, but Dean had us do these statistical models where basically we proved, and it still holds true today. Most people don't want to believe it, but that statistically speaking, you have as much chance as being correct in consistently picking stocks as you do flipping, as choosing heads or tails on
Yeah,
a coin.
yeah,
Okay. So what that means is that statistically speaking, if we got 10,000 people flipping coins, one of those people would guess right 100 times.
right.
And we would say, that guy's a genius. We'd be like, this is the most incredible thing I have ever seen. That guy somehow knows the weight, the thumb trajectory, the whatever, the wind speed, right? But it's statistics. One person is going to get lucky. The numbers might not
Yeah,
hold
yeah,
to this exact thing, but you get what I'm saying,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Same thing with stock pickers. There's no, statistically speaking, somebody is going to get lucky and pick right X% of the time.
Yeah.
And we're going to think it's going to, because of smarts, because of this, because of that, the la, 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 la. So what we did was, and the way you ultimately prove that is you do it over 10-year holding periods.
Mm, right.
So statistically speaking, a stock picker who was great for 10 years, statistically wasn't great the next 10 years. And
Mm,
it's just proven again and again and again. And again.
mm,
So anyway, thank you for following this line of thinking. So with podcasts, with 4 million podcasts out there, statistically,
mm.
somebody's going to get lucky and hit it right out of the gate.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just going to happen. Right message, right. Honestly,
Bunch of
some of the,
accidents, right?
yeah, a bunch of accidents. And even that,
Yeah.
I'll listen to some of these massive podcasts and I'm like, it's painful for me to listen to, right? I'm like, I don't get it, right? And that's not to say it's bad. It's just to say,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, that statistically, that one, boom,
That
right?
one took off. Well, do you
Yep.
remember Chris Anderson's book, The Long Tail? Um,
No, but it sounds like I need to read it.
that'd be a good. It's gosh, I think Long Tail's almost 20 years old, but in brief, Chris Anderson, former editor of Wired magazine, said, here's an interesting observation. Half of Amazon sales come from a tiny number of books, and half come from the long tail, which is a power curve, always shows up in nature. I am sure, without looking at a single stat, that the listenership of podcasts is long tail. A few of them at the head get half the views, and then it tails off where most of them are, 5, 10, 2, my mother and some other friend kind of thing, right?
So yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. So check it out. I'll tell you some cool things about podcasting. And I don't know if I answered your question, but I'll tell you my experience with it. Okay. So and the question was, where do I see this going? I think
Yeah.
podcasting has legs. I think that it will continue to have legs. I think quality conversations will stand out, like this kind of conversation right here.
Hmm.
Clearly, if somebody stumbled upon this episode and they wanted to learn about sales, marketing
Yeah. Yeah.
from a couple of old dogs, man, great episode, right? Great experience for somebody to glean and pull and and learn from and be inspired from, right? So I think that podcasting as a tool for that,
Hmm.
and people, creating their own ads and things like that, stations and things is going to go. But what happened to TV, right? Pretty soon it was regulated. There's a great chance that somebody says in America, like, you need to start a podcast, you need a license. You need to have these credentials. You just not anybody can just start talking about whatever they want. It
Interesting.
might sound crazy, but that's what we
Interesting.
do
Yeah.
in America.
Hmm.
We're like,
Hmm.
it's like zero barrier to entry, and then
Yeah.
there's a barrier to entry. So maybe that happens, maybe not. Maybe it's like, what are you going to talk about? Oh, you can't, you have to be licensed to talk about that or something. I could see things.
I'll make you a counter prognostication.
Yeah,
Given the digital basis of podcasting, it's equally likely that we'll see a monopoly or probably a duopoly end up with choke point control of distribution. Spotify's arguably we started to head that direction, and Apple's got obviously pretty big influence there. And if they decided they actually really cared about it, think of it like compare podcasts to the App Store, right? Not a whole lot of rules. We can start one. Getting an app in the App Store actually takes some work because there's rules and barriers to hop through. If there are a small enough number of companies in the catbird seat controlling it, and they'd start it's the digital era version of regulation, right?
love it. Yeah. You know what's interesting about that? You just made me think too. You know how companies will want to go public? And
Mm-hmm.
so instead of going through all the regulation, who is it, the SEC,
Yeah.
Security and
Securities and
Exchange
Exchange
Commission.
Commission. Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of going through all that, they'll go buy a stock that's
Yeah.
in effect just sitting there.
Yeah.
The company's not real, or it's not that it's not real, but it's not doing anything.
Yeah.
And so
Reverse
something will
merger to get the ticker symbol.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you just made me think that when those choke points start happening, and they will,
Yeah. I
There's
think so.
just no way around it, probably,
Yeah.
right? Like we were down to Facebook and YouTube, and TikTok somehow came into the fray. But
Interesting.
the
Right.
yeah,
Interesting how they did.
yeah, there might be value in there'll be some sort of grandfathered thing, right? So if you have an app in the App Store,
Right.
you
Right.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Your podcast is grandfather. Congratulations.
yes, right. And so then all of a sudden these old podcasts will have value because they're
Right.
in the ecosystem already.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, podcasting to me, the illusion is that we need to speak on Joe Rogan's podcast. The reality is with what I do and my price point and how I serve people, if you have a captive audience of 10 people or 20 people, if you have 20 downloads, 10 downloads, and that they're willing that is value to me, and how I can repurpose this content.
Hmm.
Right. So if somebody said to me, hey, Mischa, or I said to you, hey, you can go speak on a stage in front of 10 or 20 people and talk about what you do, and they are probably interested, is that a value to you?
Right. Right.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
it to me.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
okay. And then podcasts come and go, right?
Yeah.
Podcasts come and go. And so you'll see someone start with that 3 episodes and then stop, and then all of a sudden they're starting again. So I
Mm-hmm.
think there's that. The other thing is I interviewed along the way, I've got to interview some bigger people on my podcast, bigger, whatever that means, but like people that have followings and power, or call it what you will. They're not sharing it with their audiences. You know what I figured out? People that are sometimes not interviewed on a podcast ever, and they're passionate about what they do,
Mhm.
and then they speak on a podcast, they share it with everybody they know. I was just on a podcast. They share it with their
Right,
family,
right.
friends,
Yeah,
associates, right?
yeah.
It's this illusion of like, I get Joe Rogan on there. I mean, Joe would be great because all of a sudden, but you get what I'm saying. Like, there's this idea that I need to be targeting certain people. Like, if I'm looking for podcast growth, maybe interview people that aren't always interviewed,
Hmm. Yeah,
then they're going to share it with everybody. So that
for sure.
is, I figured that out. Like, that's a great way to go. Like, if you want to get some quick subscribers, some quick new audience.
Yeah,
Anyway, there you go. There's
there
a
you
little
go.
tip for
We
you.
should wrap, but hopefully someone listens to this set of insights that you shared. Where do they come find you if they go, oh, I want to talk to this guy?
Yeah. So badzuck.com. You can always
Badzuck,
go
that's
to
right.
badzuck.com.
Badzuck.com. I
Yeah.
love that.
And
I will
then
always remember that now.
yeah. And then my podcast is The Table Rush Talk Show. The Table Rush Talk Show.
Okay.
And then obviously you can always DM me on Facebook. So there's not many Mischa Zvegintzovs out there.
Zvegintzov. Well,
Yes.
Mischa,
So
it has been a fantastic conversation. I am so glad we connected and that you made the time to come on and talk with me.
Matthew, it's been amazing. Dr. Dunn, if that's more appropriate. Thank you for having me.
I just do that to annoy people on LinkedIn. Thanks. We're out.